and welcome everybody to this month's edition of The Wellness Policy. My name is Wei Ting. I am joined, as always, by Jordan Goodman. Jordan, what's up?
Yes, it's the weed episode, Wei. I could not be more excited. I'd say let's get fucked up, but not because we're necessarily going to get intoxicated, but we have a superstar guest, we could say, today.
Superstar is how I would accurately describe it. Yes, because we have another guest on for this particular episode. And when it comes to weed and cannabis and marijuana, I actually have quite a few people in my life I could pick from. But I think the person I would go to the very first is this person. He's a man of many expertises, including music, including professional wrestling, but maybe among all of them, one of his most well-known, I think, attributes is that he is somebody who knows a whole lot about marijuana. His name is Damian Abraham. What is going on, Damien?
Yeah, what's up? Put the lighters up. I'm doing great. That is an amazing introduction. Thank you both for having me. Honored to be here. I think put me up way too much with put me over way too hard with the superstar thing. And I think, Wei, you could have gone to Amy Anonymous, but I think I beat her in the wrestling knowledge. So where she beats me in the cannabis knowledge for sure. But I'm very happy to be here to talk about weed and wellness and wrestling, the 3 W's.
Weed, wellness, and wrestling. Yes, wonderful. Jordan, you are somebody who wanted to do this particular episode for quite some time, and maybe care to explain why this topic interests you so much.
So I love marijuana, and spoiler, I don't smoke all the time. Maybe at times in my life I've been, let's say, a stoner of sorts, but weed, cannabis, pot, whatever we call it, it is something that I have for a long time been a fierce defender of, especially as it relates, through the lens of wellness and personal development and community development. And us doing something called the Wellness Policy, for a while now, I've been wanting to get a bit louder about the culture, the potential, and the plant that is cannabis.
And for you, Damien, I know kind of your story. You're somebody who I think famously has, been for much of your life straight edge, and somebody who's discovered marijuana a bit later on in life. But certainly, like with many of your passions, once you get into it, you really get into it. Care to tell our audience about maybe some of your history?
Yeah, I was straight edge for a very long time. And once again, like Wei said, when I'm into something, I'm really into it. So I was very, I got a tattoo on my lip when I was 16. 3 X's. Most of it is bled out at this point. I was very, very straight edge. I guess if you're listening to the podcast version, you don't really see the tattoo, but I showed my lip tattoo there. And then, at around 30, I was on tour, not having a great time being on tour in a band. I look back on a lot of my behavior prior to kind of, finding cannabis and realize like a lot of what I was doing was sort of reactions to an anxiety disorder that I have and sort of, symptoms of that, from, self-harming on stage when I used to cut myself open with the razor blade, a la all our favorite wrestlers, or breaking bottles on my head, or all this sort of stuff. And so once again, I was on tour, not in a good place. I had back pain, as we were talking about off air, and just in Amsterdam one night decided, I guess we weren't in, we must have been in Amsterdam. Maybe it was Rotterdam. So it wasn't that high, but it just was a long time ago. One of the dams. And I just decided to smoke some weed with the band and after the show, and it just changed the entire way I was looking at the situation that I was in, and kind of began looking at cannabis as a relief for anxiety. And I was on anxiety pills. I'd been on anxiety pills for a number of years at that point, anti-anxiety pills, I should say. And never liked them, never liked the side effects. And from cannabis, I found relief from all the symptoms that I was suffering from without any of the side effects. And the side effects were, like I had problems sleeping. I certainly had some interesting choices in appetites at the time, food-wise, and maybe not making the most healthy decisions for myself in terms of soda consumption. I mean, pop consumption. I was drinking 3 liters a day of Pepsi most days, and maybe more. Actually, if I'm being honest with myself. And just with cannabis, I was able to kind of like slow everything down and unpack my life. And from like Wei said, I had to get into it in a deep way, and got into it. I was at the time doing some stuff with Vice with the band, and at that point, Vice started making documentaries about cannabis, and I said, well, actually, first they hit me up. Actually, if I'm being the whole story, it's a little longer this way, but they hit me up to do a promo for Budweiser, and I was like, well, I don't drink alcohol, and I don't really think that's like a good fit for me. And they're like, well, we're also thinking about doing a documentary about weed. And I'm like, well, I love medical cannabis, and I'm getting my medical, and had by that point made the decision to switch over from anti-anxiety pills and go completely, cannabis with treatment of my anxiety, and made these documentaries with Vice. And from there got into it pretty deep, and am still a fan of cannabis. I don't know if I'm quite as deep. I think legalization here really killed off a lot of the culture that myself and actually Wei, for a non-cannabis smoker, were kind of more involved in. There hasn't really been a new culture that's kind of taken its place yet. There's been, I don't know, like a rush to kind of fill a marketplace, but not necessarily any sort of better understanding of the plant. Like, I really feel like, like I got to experience the roaring 20s of weed in Canada. And I think we actually peaked in terms of knowledge and access to products, certainly in Vancouver. Out in Vancouver and Victoria, it was amazing for this sort of stuff. Just before legalization. And actually legalization has taken things kind of a step back. Things are a lot more underground on one side of the market. Things are a lot more above ground on the other side of the market, but there's not as many products. Certainly the medical side of cannabis has been lost in legalization, which has been a sad thing to kind of see happen. But, it was bound to happen given the way people were trying to make money off this thing.
A whole lot of topics you kind of touched on that I definitely want to get into a bit later on. But before we even move on in the conversation, something I'm looking for a bit more clarity about is the proper termination when we're talking about cannabis or marijuana or weed. Like, what is the more commonly acceptable way to call this plant?
I call it cannabis. I call it weed. Marijuana is problematic in its origins. It was a kind of a racist term that was applied to cannabis, and it was against Mexican people, and that is kind of like where its origins are. So I've kind of tried to move away from that, and there's been more of a shift to move away from that within cannabis. But yeah, like cannabis is generally that's I think the most accepted sort of like scientific term. And then weed, though, I think weed, I got to keep it fun. So and it is a weed, it grows wild in places like a weed. So what a weed though, Wei. What a weed.
I suppose, yes, I suppose so. Yeah. So we heard a bit about maybe Damian's history with it, and we'll just kind of go around the circle here, and maybe I'll go next. As Damien alluded to, I'm not a cannabis smoker. I have been in the past, and I think like a lot of people, maybe you discover it when you're younger, just hanging out with friends. In fact, like I might have smoked weed before I had my first drink, like probably when I was like 19 or so. And I think I, like a lot of people, like, had a lot of fun with friends, like just hanging out in their basements and discovering it and just laughing a lot. But my experience with it has definitely been more like up and down, in that I've shortly after maybe some of those first few times, my experience with it was definitely more on like the heady sort of paranoia type of side. And I would come out of like numerous experiences not really enjoying myself a whole lot. But, intermittently, I think just hanging out with various people, and it's so much like, I think you learn a lot about maybe yourself in some ways, because you know, they say that like whatever is sort of inside you just kind of comes out. And I absolutely recognize the people that I was most comfortable with, that I was comfortable smoking around with, were people that I was generally most comfortable with. And, you know, that includes somebody like yourself, Damien. But it was never something, and it continues to not be something that I actively seek out. It's not something I necessarily need in my life, but I'm happy and 100% glad that it is there for people who do, because I've seen more than enough evidence that it has been completely beneficial for several people. So, yeah, that's sort of my little history. What about yours, Jordan?
Yeah, so I didn't get high for the first time until maybe 21. And Damien, I'm certainly a bit more curious about your history with being straight edge. So when I was younger, I never identified as straight edge, but I think part of my identity, certainly grade school into undergrad, was I didn't really drink or smoke. And I think looking back, maybe there were a bunch of kids in high school that I just judged, and they did that, and it seemed like they needed to get fucked up in order to like enjoy their time. And I think there was part of me that held on to this idea of like, I don't need to get fucked up to have fun. I can like play music with my friends or do whatever. Part of it too was hardcore straight edge culture. That was very interesting to me, and I found a bit of identity within that. And then after a while, I kind of got over myself and was more curious about alcohol and weed. And I had a big friend group that were stoners, that smoked every day, that would drive a couple hours to Philly to spend hundreds of dollars on new glass. And they were just very much into the culture. They were getting medicinal cannabis from California, however they did that at the time. So I had access to quality cannabis, and even visiting California, which was many years ahead of the curve relative to just about all the other states, with the exception of maybe a couple. But I was open-minded. I was around people I felt comfortable with, and it wasn't like an immediate sell. But interestingly enough, and being in this community on this channel, I remember the first time that it just like clicked with me was the Hardy Boys reunion on ECW on Sci-Fi. And it was only maybe a couple weeks or months of experimenting with weed, and I got high and I watched their reunion, and I felt this wave of nostalgia that felt incredibly novel and incredibly intoxicating. And I was like, holy shit, like I get this weed thing now, guys. Like this is fucking amazing. And from there, it became something that I experimented heavily with for great benefit, and then we can maybe go into it a bit later, but with some negative effects as well. And that was really my jumping on point. But with all that said, yeah, Damien, more pointedly, I'm curious, what was your connection to or attraction to a straight edge lifestyle for so long? It seemed like
I smoked weed and did acid for when I turned 12. I got into one day I smoked my first cigarette, had my first beer, had my first hit of a joint, and my first hit of acid, and it was an amazing day. In retrospect, I had no regrets about any of my drug experiences. It's weird as a parent now, because you want to tell your kids, you got to stay away from this stuff. But all these early experiences I had with these things were incredible. So I'm gonna be very quiet in case one of my kids comes home upstairs and hears this. But no, it is interesting though, because I did all this stuff as a young kid, got busted by the cops for shoulder tapping, which is when you get someone older than you to buy beer for you. And they called my parents and they forbid me from hanging out with all my hippie friends at the time. And so I had to start, and I became a summer camp counselor in training at Ryerson Sports Camp, which was hilarious for a lot of reasons. Me at a sports camp, me in responsible roles, a lot of stuff was hilarious about it. But while I was there, I met this kid named Nick who wrote graffiti and got me into Sonic Youth. And so I got super into Sonic Youth and through that, I kind of got into punk, and through punk, eventually I learned about straight edge. And there's this whole other crazy story involving AFI and a riot in Toronto, and Davey Havoc coming over to my house, and him and I talking about straight edge on the walk to my house. And I would have been about 15 at this point. And from there, I was like, okay, I'm going to be straight edge. And, there was just something about straight edge that was so cool. Like, it was, to me, it was like a real form of rebellion. Like you were saying, like I wanted an excuse not to drink and not to do drugs. And I hated the fact that I had to, and I felt obligated to, in order to be part of a social group at that point. Like, it really wasn't active peer pressure. There was active peer pressure. Who am I kidding? But there was also like this sort of passive peer pressure that you just had to do this or else you were a loser. And then so, it's Josh from my band actually described it to me one time as like punk gives you like a cheat code for life. And it's true. Like, once I got punk, I was like, oh shit. Like, there's problems with punk. Don't get me wrong. And lots of, there's lots of fucking problems with punk and hardcore and straight edge, but it also gives you like a complete escape from society and pressures in society, where all of a sudden you're like, none of this stuff matters. Like, oh shit, all the kids that are the coolest kids in my school are actually the biggest fucking losers. And all the stuff is turned upside down. Like, it's like the Matrix, like you see all the code happening. And that's really what I think I loved about it. And I think straight edge was a way to kind of have, all the shitty parts about it, like a moral superiority over my peers, because I was able to say no. And now I realize how foolish it was. And I probably denied myself a lot of amazing experiences, but also at the same time, I probably also saved myself from a lot of really bad experiences. And also at the same time had a lot of amazing experiences because I was straight edge and stuff. But, coming to cannabis, I definitely have no regrets about that either. There are very little things in my life that I have regret over in terms of, that side of things, like it feels like, NoFX has the song Drugs Are Good. And it's like, it's kind of like, their whole thing is like, oh, if you do them, people think you're cool. But it's like one of those things where like drugs are great. If you do them, people think you're cool. And if you don't, people think that you're cool. And when I say drugs, though, I please try and stay away from opioids, because I've definitely lost a lot of friends to that and things like that. So I don't mean to be putting over everything. There's definitely some huge risks with a lot of concentrated forms of drugs out there. And there's a lot of shit, like, especially now with fentanyl, that, anything that's a face drug or a powder drug, I would stay very clear of, or a pill drug at this point. But I mean, in terms of cannabis and psychedelics and, know your dealer type stuff, I feel like there's a lot of positive experiences that I've had with them.
You bring up an interesting, perhaps conversation, Damien, even just like how language is constructed in different cultures. So what we actually consider to be a drug and what we might consider to be, let's say, a quote unquote good, often legal drug, or a bad, often illicit drug. But we can think of sugar as a drug. We could think of caffeine as a drug, not unlike you had different experiences with an anti-anxiety medication, which as well is a drug. And perhaps to your point as well, with the rebranding of cannabis as marijuana some 100 years ago, like it was this cultural narrative of this is a bad drug and it's not to be trusted. But yet all of these pharmaceutical medications are certainly good and acceptable and worth the investment of your body and your money.
Harry Anslinger is one of the biggest pieces of shit of all time, and should be kind of regarded in the same way we talk about people like Hitler. Just like, not in terms of to ever say that, overstate how horrible he was, but if you look at how many people's lives have been ruined by the racism and by the hatred that was behind a lot of the laws that he helped enact early on. And I think that's kind of what we're coming out of now, where we're looking at this stuff differently. But it really is one guy, this one guy that got in all the right ears, that hated weed and was very racist. And that is abundantly clear from all the quotes that he has out there. And from that, he became the drug czar from the United Nations. And he's the one who's responsible for the criminalization of not just cannabis but coca leaves, which leads to cocaine, and like all this sort of stuff that like has come out of the drug war on both sides that are negative. You can all be traced back to this one dude. And it's crazy when you look at the history of this thing and see how much harm has been done and how much harm continues to be done. There's been more than 6,000 cannabis arrests in Canada, or more probably arrests. Sorry, I guess this is the ones that they've advanced to trial since legalization's happened. I was reading the other day. Probably I should look up the stat because I'm probably misquoting it, but I mean I don't mean right now, you guys, but I mean if you're listening to this and you're interested. But they're still arresting people for weed in Canada, and they're still ruining people's lives over this stuff. Anyway, but yeah, I think Harry Anslinger is such a monster for what has come out of it, and like there's just so many people's lives, so many cultures that have been ruined, and you know, like obviously there's a lot of privilege even in the drug war that you're lucky to fall in these countries that were trying to be quote unquote protected. The countries that were looked at as being producers of this stuff, like, oh my God, the destruction that has been wrought on these countries in the name of prohibition.
You know, you speak a lot about perhaps the identity and culture that surrounds cannabis, and I mean, I do wonder, like, is a lot of it tied to the fact that it is. Or at least it has been for much of its our history, like a prohibited substance. If this never occurred over the past 100 years or so, and we strictly looked at cannabis as the way we do caffeine, would there be so much, I think, identity tied to and so much culture, grown around this?
Well, there might be, because you look at coffee, and you look at the way people like spend hours doing pour over method for coffee and the cold brew and just sort of this obsession that exists for coffee or
there are
beer.
People making like songs about. No, people are making songs. People are forming Patreons around coffee. That's for sure. But it's nothing to the level of I would say marijuana.
But marijuana is different too, right? Because like I think marijuana could be it's bigger than that. Weirdly. Like, and I don't mean that to say that we're all going to be doing, dabs, but I think like more in the fact that like you're talking about your back pain in a like a real, truly cannabis is legal world. I would be like, go to the cannabis store and get a CBD full spectrum extract and a THC full spectrum extract and do a 10-to-1 ratio. And get like a salve and put that on your back, and try this stuff. Like, because that is a way you can use cannabis, like there are cannabis suppositories. Like you could get cannabis suppositories for a moment. Like this stuff has all disappeared, under legalization. But I think cannabis is like, it's more than just coffee because like, yeah, like it's the caffeine side of things, which I guess you could look at as being the THC, but then it's also all these other applications. Like, I honestly saw a kid come out of a seizure on like the Charlotte's Web oil, like it was just so wild where this stuff has kind of gone just in the last few years, where legalization's kind of been on the horizon and people were able to kind of push this stuff forward. Just to think about where it could go ultimately, it's amazing to kind of think about where we're going to see this thing be in 50 years from now that we have legalization, hopefully, because there's people still doing research with it. It's unfortunately not at the forefront anymore because it can't be used to advance something that's going to make people a lot of money, but there's still people looking into the science side of things.
Well, at least in this country, sorry, Wei, I just wanted to say in the States, I mean, it's still federally a Schedule I drug, essentially suggesting that it is among the most elite of substances with certainly no medicinal value. And that's been one of the chokeholds on this plant for the past century, is that there hasn't been an opportunity to actually explore objective medical benefits of the plant. Certainly now there's been a bit more and more. And I am a novice when it comes to this stuff, but at least to my understanding, we're starting to discover the immense potential of all the different cannabinoids within the plant, and not just thinking of this as something to get high or stoned off of, but perhaps kind of zeroing in on certain elements of the plant can produce all kinds of different medicinal effects. But again, we only know so much because, at least in the US, there's been so much red tape around just being curious about what could be unlocked within the plant.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I feel like there's a lot that we're learning constantly. I think it's weird though, because there's also this continual disinformation, like the indica sativa divide, like all this sort of stuff that is just so baked in to the legal industry at this point that it's interesting to see all the progression that's happening kind of, for the people that are still super want to be in the know about it versus the stuff that's happening on the mainstream side of things, and I think that it's interesting to kind of see the battle for weed happening that's still going on, where there's still people that are like, pulling it to be one thing or pulling it to be another thing. And it's kind of all things at once.
In places where... Sorry, Jordan.
Please wait.
I just wanted to ask, like, in places where it has been legalized, Damien, like, how do you feel like it's changed things? You brought up like positive and negative points, it seems.
Yeah, like I think you can't underestimate the amount of privilege you experience in Canada, not having to worry about being arrested for it now. And I obviously had a lot of privilege to begin with, not having to worry about being arrested for it. If you look at the statistics about who gets arrested for weed, but I think that being said, like it just feels so weird to go back to a place where if you get caught smoking weed, they could deport you, or they could throw you in jail or worse, like there's a lot of places where it is still very much criminalized. So I think that's the biggest change that happens with legalization, obviously, is the fact that that threat kind of disappears. The one thing it does also do, though, is undermine the cultures of these things, and kind of we've seen time and time again in jurisdictions that have legalized a rush to make a lot of money. A lot of people that are involved in politics clearly look at this as being a way to kind of make some money on the side, or, people with political favor, the amount of people that ex-cops that have walked into a lot of these weed companies, and like way in Toronto, Julian Fantino has opened a cannabis dispensary in Kensington Market.
Wow.
The guy who's responsible for arresting how many dozens, hundreds probably of kids in that very neighborhood for cannabis now has the audacity to open up a legal store there. So, as much as there's a lot of positive things that happens with legalization, there's also just like this unbelievable, horrible, cynical side of it. Oh, Julian Fantino, I should add, was the former police chief of Toronto. And not a very well-liked police chief in Toronto during his time. And during after this time too. But it's just, so I think that's the thing that's really kind of happened in legalization. Like, that being said, there's some places where Oregon has a great legal system because they turned down legalization like 3 times until they finally got the legalization that they wanted. And so the legalization there's still, it feels like the culture's kind of retained a lot more there versus other places where you've had the cannabros come in, which are, investor types that are looking to make a lot of money off this plant and trying to industrialize it. And it's something that doesn't really respond very well to that, and I think that's why there's been more of an inferior product available and it's been more expensive. And I think, there's a lot of problems with the legalization of cannabis on a structural level.
Yeah, and I guess from the most cynical but perhaps realistic point of view, look, this stuff could get overturned, at least in the States or other parts of the world legislatively. Certainly, there is a public majority who believe that this plant should be legal, even just for personal grow and personal use. But like many things throughout the world and in the States, once the pharmaceutical companies or the tobacco companies, the alcohol companies, whomever it may be, once they're in a position to profit from it, I think overnight this stuff will just turn around and the world goes on. It will be interesting from, I guess, a cultural point of view to see how this shakes out, and that's really where, again, just communication and branding comes into play, and those with the most money and influence to see how they tell the story of this product. But not unlike coffee, I'm sure we're going to get hundreds of different versions of it. We will get, a very science-based culture. We will get a Starbucks and Dunkin' culture. We will get more creative, artistic culture throughout it, and it goes on. And I guess it really comes down to how the public in general tend to resonate. Some people just want to get high, have fun, get fucked up. Some people want to get well and not be sick. And I guess it really depends what stories are being told that resonates with each market.
Yeah. Oh, go on. Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I really think that it's going to be a lot of things. As long as people have the right to grow their own, that's, I think, what changes it is then the control is always going to be in the hands of the people, because anyone can grow weed. I've seen some people that are not very well functioning human beings that on anyone's metrics or by any other metric that are able to grow unbelievable cannabis, some of the most beautiful cannabis I've ever seen. And I think that's the thing about it. Like, you can grow amazing cannabis and you can do unbelievable things on your own as long as you have the right to grow your own. And I think that's going to be, the thing that they're going to try and take away from people. And that you can see that not in Canada. Actually, no, I shouldn't say that. Quebec, you can't grow your own weed in Quebec. In Ontario you can, in most other provinces you can. You're limited in what you can grow, but you do have the right to grow your own because, at the end of the day, it's just a plant.
Which to me is the crazy thing about it, perhaps one of the craziest things about it. It's a naturally occurring substance that for millennia has endured and become significantly healing and beneficial, not just medicinal use, but hemp product, etc.
Yeah.
But it's mind blowing if you really take a bit of time and consider how the story of the plant has evolved throughout our culture.
That being said, this is how I choose to consume it these days, which is very little plant resemblance at this point. But it's hash, which is one of the oldest art forms, I guess, is extracting the part of the cannabis plant that you want from the plant matter, which doesn't really serve any sort of greater purpose. And this is a full spectrum extract, which is where they will take, once again, washing the plant, washing everything away till what you're left with is just pure terpenes and pure THC and CBD and Delta 9, like all of the various cannabinoids. I think there's like 108 of them now, but THC being the predominant one in most of this stuff.
So off air, I mentioned I've had a handful of bad trips smoking cannabis, and I've taken one dab in my life, maybe 10 plus years ago. And again, these were my friends who this is what they did every day, and they were looking for the most pure form. And I experienced my mother's funeral as if it was happening in real time, and it was fucking horrific. I felt so sick and was just stuck in this experience for an hour. That might be my mom calling, by the way.
No, I think it's my house. Let me just see who this is. One sec. I think it's on the outside line. There we go. Sorry about that. Go on. Bad trip.
Bad trip. And I think that could be a helpful thing to share is that, I don't like to create, a black or white or all or nothing narratives. This stuff is very powerful, and thus it is perhaps not for everyone in certain ways, and it certainly takes a bit of let's say guidance or maturity or education or sensitivity to really experiment and explore and get a sense of what may work or what may not work for you. Just like, you could drink a bunch of caffeine and feel like you're having a heart attack or a panic attack. So
Yeah.
I don't want to just paint this with like one broad stroke of weed is the best thing ever, and we encourage everyone to just consume as much as they'd like.
No, I think everyone's got their own personal relationship with cannabis, and that could be not consuming it at all. I think that's the reality. I think there is probably, like a wider percentage of the population that could have a greater relationship with cannabis. But that being said, like you're saying, it's not for everybody. And I think there are some people that, I've seen have negative reactions. I've watched people projectile vomit after doing a dab. I've seen people get frozen in time after doing a dab. Like, I've seen some wild things happen from people doing dabs. But dabs is when I'm consuming this, I think, I should also, you're right to point out that I'm a very experienced cannabis user at this point, and came about in this culture that Wai kind of was alluding to, because Wai, once again, was kind of around this culture too a little bit, that was, like the most extreme cannabis users in Toronto. And that was really where I kind of learned about a lot of this stuff, was being around people in vape bars. And that, and I don't even know how, I do not know how you would come to dabbing without, either a heavy duty smoker friend or without one of these vape lounges, because there's no real way to learn torch safety without fucking around with a torch. And it's really not something you want to fuck around with.
It's not something you could just pick up at the store and just figure it out. Yeah, I mean, what Damien was alluding to was that I was involved with like several video productions based around marijuana, and among them people that were pretty deep in the community. In fact, actually did some live webcasts with Damien actually at a vape bar for
we did.
a time. It was a lot of fun, but what always struck me was just how I think interesting the entire culture was, how dedicated everybody was to this one thing. And I've been out of it for quite a bit, but it sounds to me like, Damien, it's there's always colorful stories and colorful characters attached to that entire scene.
The wildest shit ever was when Lady Gaga showed up to Vapor Central and ripped a dab, and it wasn't filled. Yeah, like it didn't have any water in it, so she took a dry dab, and it was pretty harsh from what I've heard. But yeah, a lot of amazing kind of stuff came out of that. But it was a very heavy cannabis culture that we were a part of. It was like a weird thing where it would bring a lot of different types of people together. But because of the criminalization of cannabis, the reality is that it is kind of criminalized. So a lot of the stuff where you're associating with are people that have been criminalized, and that's the reality of that sort of situation. Like, it's a lot of people that are dealing with, having been arrested or having been locked up because of just weed, and
mm-hmm. Something that also really struck me, like working on some of those shows, was just the incredible variety that exists within, the genre, I guess we could say, and the types of ways you can ingest it. Something I didn't realize at all was just even the distinction between indica and sativa. And I think when people, you guys talk about maybe weed not being for everybody. Well, maybe it's a lack of education and not exactly knowing the effects of certain types that are out there that might affect some of that. So would you guys care to maybe speak a little bit about that, and maybe what has worked for you guys personally?
For me, I think the thing that indica and sativa I don't really believe in, is I think that's the
and what's that?
Indica and sativa were two classifications that were given to cannabis by, I believe, one was a French researcher and one might have been an English researcher, or one might have been Dutch. Anyway, two separate researchers operating independently, separated by decades and geographically. First witnessed cannabis being cultivated, thus cannabis sativa, and it grew long and skinny. And I've been told that that's because it was probably planted farm style. So these plants were growing very close together. And then another researcher in India, or another plant expert, I should know these terms, botanist, I guess, in India, was examining plants, and came across this plant that was a very large spread out bush. And he classified this as indica, cannabis indica, because it was, growing wider. But mainly he called it indica because he found it in India, and indica means India. That's why there's indica mangoes and indica, and so these were the two classifications. And apparently, Dutch seed companies, when they were getting into the business of selling seeds, these were the two classifications they had. But from what I've been told, it really depends on whatever the guy thinks it is. Like some seeds were being thrown in indica, some were being thrown in sativa. And eventually when they started selling seeds in Canada out of cannabis culture out in Vancouver, I've also heard stories that a lot of times people were ordering indica and getting sativa and whatever, because it really is a much broader plant than just two classifications of it. And there's, sometimes you'll smoke something that someone will be like, oh, this is a pure sativa. And if you smoke enough of it, you'll pass out, and then sometimes you can smoke indica and it can make you very hyper. It's so situational. It depends on the terpenes. It depends on the cannabinoids present. There's just so much stuff going into it. And we're still using this old classification, which really doesn't have any sort of connection other than the fact that it's got this tradition.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I think for me, it's more about considering the environment. And when I say environment, that means not only my physical environment. Does this feel like a place that I'd want to smoke some weed right now? Who am I around? Does anyone have like a negative attitude or bad vibes? Knowing that, what am I going to do in the near future? Also my inner environment, like how am I feeling? And I certainly pay attention to that. I usually don't maybe care a bit too much about like indica or sativa. I may pay more attention to like percentages of things like THC or CBD. But for me, it's like, I'll just take a small hit and then wait a few minutes and see how I react to it. And if it feels good, and if it feels like I want more, then I'll consume more. So for me, it's just kind of like go slow and experiment. And then also paying much attention to like how am I feeling? Where am I? Does this feel like it's a place where I want to commit to this? Because many years ago, I would smoke every day, so I wasn't as concerned of like what am I about to do or what do I have to do in an hour. Now I don't smoke as often. Sometimes I'll smoke every day for a couple weeks, and then I'll go 6 months without smoking. And that's just how it's been for me the past decade or so. But because of that, I'm certainly much more sensitive because I haven't built up that more consistent tolerance. Yeah, I guess that's been my general approach. Wei, I guess, if you're willing, I'm curious, like, is it something that you ever think about? I'm wondering if you had like really great, perhaps transformative experiences consuming it throughout your life, or you've had some not so great experiences, which is why it's made it less appealing to you.
Well, for me, I would say it's been a mix, but I tend to maybe remember more so the negative experiences than the positive.
What about our time, Wei? What about the time
that was certainly a positive.
We ate all the McDonald's afterwards.
Oh, no, that was a lot of fun. That was great, absolutely. But I mean that also like I definitely have like great times. Again, it goes so much towards like who I'm around and the vibe that is typically created when I can feel relaxed. But for me, like more often than not, when I have smoked weed or ingested, like it just makes me think. It just brings a lot of my kind of self-criticisms to the forefront. And I'm somebody who already is, I think, really self-deprecating in, usually I can kind of curb it pretty well, but like it's just very difficult for me to personally turn off when I'm at the will of a substance. And when you get trapped in that zone and you can't snap out of it, like that is a feeling that I don't really particularly enjoy. And again, I know enough about myself and my experience with cannabis that I know I need to surround myself with the right people, be in the right context, be in the right state of mind, in order to really enjoy it. But for the most part, I don't necessarily crave it, for me to jump through all those hoops. So that's my own personal experience.
I relate to that, and I have a similar experience. I guess whenever I go into a much more present, self-aware practice, especially a meditation in public with other people, where sometimes I anticipate for maybe the first few minutes, there's going to be like choppy waters because I'm attempting to settle down a bit. Or if I smoke weed, often I become more present and more aware of what's actually within me. And those choppy waters can be a bit intense. But I think for me, I'm actually noticing what probably was there prior and what maybe is kind of like a baseline of my present moment experience. I just may not be as conscious of it. But over time, I have a trust in the process. I have a trust in myself. And I know that if I just breathe, if I trust myself in the experience, then I'll it's almost like sinking from those choppy waters at the surface to kind of going a bit deeper, where things become more still and more clear and typically more peaceful, in a way which is often really lovely, where I feel like I can be self-aware, I can be intimately conscious or aware of what's happening with my inner and outer experience, but in a way that more often than not is certainly not unpleasant. If anything, illuminating and joyful.
Yeah, at this point, I wanted to open it up to a lot of the people joining us in the chat room who might have some stories of their own to share, or simply a question to ask. And if you guys don't mind, let's go to some of those calls right now from people who've been waiting. And let's start off here with Chris. Chris, you're first up in the wellness policy. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can. Hey,
Awesome.
Chris.
Hello,
Hi,
Chris.
I wanted to say first, I'm a huge fan, Damien. I love
Thank you very much.
the wrestler documentary. I wish there would be more, but
So do I. That was a great year of my life. That was a year with very, very insane weed stories, to be sure, because finding it on the road was interesting at times. But yeah, like it's the best year of my life. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
nice. So I just wanted to share a few of my experiences. One, weed literally changed my life in that WrestleMania 27, I hadn't watched wrestling in probably 10, 15 years, and decided to give it just a random chance because I saw some ads for it, watched it stoned, and realized, holy shit, this is really, really fun. So, and it's got me back into the point where, I'm now listening to Post every week, like every day.
I'm really curious because can you describe because I have watched Wrestling Stone, and yeah, it is actually in some ways more enjoyable. I'm curious for you though, what exactly it is about watching wrestling while high that makes it so different.
I think it kind of takes us down to more of your base instincts, so you can react to the things more. You can mark out as one says, and it just makes it more fun.
I also notice I can pay attention to the details much more easily, or just not unlike listening to music or going to a museum. I think for me things at least feel like they slow down a bit more, and perhaps that's just the ability to take in more in the present moment. So if I'm high and I'm watching wrestling, maybe I notice the psychology of the match a bit more. Maybe I notice the technique of a certain move more. Maybe I notice some production element or some the relationship between the performers and the audience. I feel like I have more access, and thus it becomes a more rich, intimate experience for me.
How about you, Damien? Yeah.
I think, like you're saying, it brings you more present. I find it also for me allows me to see the hilarity in stuff that otherwise might frustrate me, and I might get caught up being like, oh my God, this bothers me for so many reasons. But then with cannabis, I find, and this goes for in all aspects of my life, it really lets me let go and realize how petty and bullshit my concerns were on a lot of this sort of stuff. And yeah, I've had some of my favorite experiences ever stoned at wrestling events, like Steen winning the belt from Davey Richards at ROH. Stoned, like, like smash wrestling shows, going all sorts of stuff, like I really do, like for me, wrestling and my love of wrestling and kind of like meeting yourself and John and really getting super deep into it where I was watching it all the time kind of coincides perfectly with me getting into cannabis, and I really do have a strong relationship between the two. And also, like, I'm going to be honest with you, and I don't mean to break kayfabe, but a lot of your favorite wrestlers smoke a lot of weed. Like, there's really no, and I don't mean you, Wai, I mean that for all of us. Like, a lot of our favorite wrestlers smoke weed. Like, most of them. Most of them do.
Like, a lot of people smoke weed.
Yeah.
No matter what they do. And oftentimes we minimize that, or because it's not quote unquote professional or often legal.
I worked at a weed company, and I was surprised at how few people smoked weed when I worked there. And I realized, like, oh yeah, normal people don't smoke weed, but people involved in subculture, and I mean like comic books, like all subculture, I think there's more of us that are looking towards cannabis or have an interest in cannabis in these kinds of worlds. But like when I was at that weed company, there were multiple people that had no interest in smoking weed, which was great for me because I was kind of like the weed stunt dude. Like anytime they needed someone to smoke a lot of weed, they had to call me in. So it had its perks.
Chris, thank you very much for the call.
Thanks.
Let's go up next to Steve. Steve, you are on the wellness policy.
Hey, all right.
Hey, doing well.
What's up, Steve?
Hey, Steve.
This is good. This is good. I've been waiting for this episode for a long time.
My man.
I'm sitting beside the two plants that I'm currently growing.
Oh, awesome.
I can't say enough about cannabis in my life. Like, it's been great. Like when I was a kid, like 14 is when I started. And it was like I was this hyperactive kid that got on my friends' nerves, and I couldn't get my energy level down. And I found weed, and it just kind of brought everything, got me level, got me to a place. And it was just like, yes, this is perfect for me, right? Like, and I'm aware it's not for everybody, but for me, it was just, it put me exactly where I needed to be, So yeah, I've been a avid user pretty much since then. So, and like the culture and everything, it's amazing. It's so much fun. And yeah, I found that growing weed is crazy therapeutic. Just the art of having something to do every day and caring for something, like it's really incredible. So
we had a Supreme Court ruling in Canada before legalization that granted medical users the right to grow because it was deemed as being therapeutic.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people with opiate addictions. They say that's a great thing for them, giving them that structure of having something to do every day. So,
cool.
Steve, I appreciate you sharing about the hyperactivity. I never really demonstrated that when I was younger, at least more externally, but I noticed as a kid, it was often hard for me to focus, especially as it related to things that I wasn't necessarily interested in, often being, formal education. And, I would think back, I was asked to read, books and things like that and realize, fuck, I'm reading the book, but I'm not retaining any of this information. And a lot of things when I was younger, it just felt harder, and it seemed like other students, things came more naturally to them, and really even into university. And I was maybe a junior or a senior in undergrad, and this was around the time I started smoking a bit more regularly. And I was always like really, really bad with science. And what fucked me up is that if you don't understand the concepts, for the first exam, you're kind of screwed because they just continue to build upon those initial concepts. And I was taking a biopsychology class. So I was, being asked to learn the different parts of the brain and how individual brain cells function. And I got maybe a C on the first exam, and I was studying for the second, and I got high. And then I started studying and reading this textbook, and something just hit me. And that really was the turning point for me as far as understanding the power of this plant. As I was reading about, how the brain works, I just had this emotional experience where it was like, what I'm reading about is happening within me right now and at every moment, and within everyone else's brain. And it just kind of struck some emotional chord with me to the point where I went back to page 1 and started reading it out of pure interest, and ended up getting A's the rest of that class, and then ended up going to grad school in psychology and getting something close to a 4.0. And as hyperbolic as it may sound, like, I always looked back to that experience on cannabis as unlocking some potential within me that I felt like I never really had access to, where I could watch movies and not realize, oh shit, I don't know what's happening, and I haven't been paying attention the past 20 minutes. And mind you, I don't need to smoke weed in order to have access to that anymore, but it was being high that one time, it felt like it just unlocked this potential within me that dramatically changed my life, intellectually, and even spiritually to some degree.
Very cool. Thank you very much for the call, Steve. Thank you for sharing.
Cheers.
Let's go up next to Hansi. Hansi, you are on the Wellness Policy. Welcome.
What up, Hansi?
Hansi, are you there? Am I hitting the right button? Hansi.
What's up? Sorry about that.
No worries.
How's it going?
Nice to hear from you.
Well, it's going good, Damien. I hope you had a good time with your vacation, man.
Thank you.
But I'm glad you guys are talking about this. I used to, I don't do it as often anymore, but I used to because I used to be like very, very uptight because of being Pakistani and all that shit. And my parents being strict and all that. I was afraid of ever even because I used to buy into the propaganda that if you smoke weed, you're doing something really, really horrible, on the level of PCP and coke and all that. And then I remember I started doing it in high school a little bit, and I saw Adam Sandler's movie Little Nicky. That was I wasn't even smoking, but I was in a hot box, and I got contact high, and I don't know, I started doing it, and then I quit for a bit, and then I started doing it again. And this is around the time when it was after high school, and I know it's supposed to be happy feelings or whatever, right? But I felt like I wasn't really. I just didn't think. I just thought that someone like me would not be lasting in the world for this long. So I just basically did it to just pass time. I just didn't really care, and all I cared about was this, and it would cause problems in my crew because they look at my parents Hansi is rich or something like that, so they would always count on me to have it, and it would become some of the biggest problems in the world where you found out how many people are just really, really fucking selfish with that shit, and it just for a while I mean in the later years it became a little bit better, but just I remember for the first bit the fact that everyone counted on me, and then for me to say if there's 5 people and there's one little fucking thing, I would just say, hey, this is my stuff, so how about we do strict two policy and just pass it. And these people would call me a weed Nazi. And it's dude, I'm the one bringing this shit to you, and I'm trying to get everyone to do this, and yet you're calling me a fucking weed Nazi because I'm trying to fucking keep the circle going faster. So the politics about it I didn't miss, But the fact, like, I wish, like, what's happening now with fucking weed and how accepted it is, I wish like that was going on like 10, 15 years ago because it would have been perfect. Like now I'm at the point where I don't really even care about. I think because so much corporate and so much beating to the ground of marijuana, the pot references and pop culture shows and all that. It's kind of made me like look at it like, okay, it's not really that big of a deal anymore. So I kind of wish that like I was at a younger age enjoying all the stuff, whatever. Because one of my infamous stories was that what they called for one New Year's, I saved a bunch of roaches, like 150 of them or so. And then for one New Year's, I smoked like this 8 to myself, and it became like this legendary story amongst my circle and all that. And then I think I amplified my pot persona to be the be all end all as well. And I think I'm kind of glad that I moved past just being defined by that, if that makes sense. But I mean, yeah, those are kind of some of my stories, whatever. But like, I can't say that I didn't have a good time with them. It just, I just with me it was more like it's more about the politics that happened. But I feel like you guys in the sense that when you do it, you feel a bit more creative. I think that helped with my creative side a little more, and unlocked some of my mental potential, or whatever. But at the same time, like it also made me a little bit more angry to see how like people in my life would act like assholes because like they didn't want to chip in or something like that. If that makes sense. But I mean, that's all I gotta really say. I didn't really have much to really say, but I wanted to give my story because that's cool. So sorry for wasting your time if this was like not going anywhere. But thanks for letting me get my thoughts out.
Not a waste.
Thank you, Hansi.
No, and one day we'll smoke again if you're up for it.
For sure, bro. What to call it? I still can't believe we met. When I met Damien Abraham, I thought it was I thought it was this guy Ryan McKinnell from Sirius XM Busted Open when I first saw him at the Busted Open thing. So yeah, no, dude, it was good to meet you that one time, and hopefully when this whole mess is over, we'll smoke a joint at some point. Thank you guys again for letting me on.
Hey, good to talk to you, man.
Hansi.
Thank you, Hansi. Hey, let's go up next to Kevin. Kevin, thank you for waiting patiently.
What's up, boys? How we doing?
Yo,
Good. How's it going?
Fuck yeah, Damian Abraham, you're a legend, man. It's so nice to talk to you.
Good to talk to you too. I definitely I feel very good. I'm going to tell my kids all the nice things people said to me, and they're going to have to tear my ego back down.
Oh fuck yeah! No, well, that's okay. It keeps things interesting. Never a dull moment. Weed has changed my life in the last. I'm 31 now, and through my 20s, I compare myself to others. I mean, a lot of things that people normally probably would do, but it has unlocked so many like introspective. It is just Jordan was alluding to it not too long ago of like the stuff already being inside you and like just opening you up to just connecting those synapses in such a way that you're just like, damn, I'm figuring stuff out. Like the last few years I've been able to lean into the fact that I'm on the spectrum, and that's like something that was hard for me to unpack, but weed just puts me in like such a mindset that I'm just like, man, I don't know. Like, I'm glad I stayed the course because I was really struggling with life itself. And I can't say enough good things about how it's helped me out. So I just wanted to share.
Thanks for sharing, man.
Yeah, I'm glad you're in a good place from it because it definitely, I've heard it described as like the reason it helps people with all these different conditions is because it just helps you not care about them in the way. Like, I have a friend who uses cannabis for pain management, and he's like, it doesn't make the pain go away. It just makes me not care as much about the pain. And I think that's what it helped me with my anxiety. Like, it helped me kind of cope with this anxiety disorder because I just don't care about having an anxiety disorder, if that makes any sort of sense.
For sure. No, anxiety's a bitch.
Yeah. But it's also like, and I think through weed I came to this understanding, like it's really because it shaped who I am. And it's not so much like an anxiety disorder, it's just part of my personality. And like without it, I wouldn't be me, and I certainly wouldn't be doing what I do for a living or I wouldn't be talking about this stuff with everyone. That's for sure. Like it's hard to, it's not a disorder. It's just part of my personality. I've kind of come to realize.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's a superpower, and you just lean into it, and it's a part of you, and that's the person we all fuck with.
Yeah, and I think that's what we all do. I think that's what we all can do. Is took these things that are part of our personalities that are, disorders, but like at the same time, they're just like who we are, and they're just like, and that's what makes us do things differently, look at the world differently. And that can be, like you're saying, like a superpower. Like it's a beautiful thing that, I wouldn't look at the world in the same way if it wasn't for this thing. And it's not, anyway, this is I think we're on the same page on it.
Hell yeah.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Appreciate the call.
Thanks, guys. Later.
Thanks, Kevin.
Have a good night.
We go up next to the Brady. Braden Harrington himself joining us. Braden.
What is up?
Hello, fellas. I mean, I could not say hello on such a show like this. I can't believe you, Jordan, convinced Wai to do a show about weed. But in even more shocking terms, Wai, you'll smoke with Damien, but you won't smoke with me?
I don't know if you've ever asked. Have you?
Hey, the next time I see you, we're gonna have a sesh.
You probably should have asked me maybe 5-6 years ago when
you had to know Wai in the roaring pre-legalization days when we were hitting bongs at Vapor Central watching comedy shows.
Hey, let's do it. Yeah.
Next time we are together with WH Park. If you can convince that guy.
Yeah, didn't we have an agreement with John Pollock because I think he said in some way, shape, or form, he may have been a few shots deep, but he did promise us that he would smoke with me and Damien. And I think you should be in that trifecta there, Wai.
At my wedding, I believe you guys came to this agreement, and we got to hold on to that.
Somehow he agreed, but
I think John offered it. Like I don't even remember us pressuring him. I think he was like. He was, as you're saying, maybe a little intoxicated when this decision came to him, but I think John was the one who said that because we did this, he was gonna smoke with us. So
wow.
I think we've got a
rotation.
Yeah, I think we have our ultimate live WrestleMania event next year figured out for Post. We're gonna do it at a vape bar.
I would book a flight to witness that, to experience that. Holy shit. And Braden, I would certainly bring, I don't know if your video's enabled, but for those on YouTube, we all know Braden loves the 7-Eleven Sin Cara lighter. His favorite.
You smoke your joints with that? You light your joints with that Sin Cara lighter?
It hits different with this lighter, baby.
We got if you're on for 2 more minutes. I was gonna say if you're on for 2 more minutes, throw on your camera because it's gonna be 4:20. And
okay. Hold on, let me get a bowl ready. You keep talking amongst yourselves. I didn't realize the time was actually 4:20. But you like the blowtorch. It's interesting because Jordan, me and you, like we have our whole thing, and you've talked to me about how you smoke weed like sometimes, and I don't think I've ever actually smoked with you. But then Wai, you've talked to me about weed, but we never really smoke it. Damien, we've definitely talked about weed, and Damien's doing dabs on this show, but we did the best death match ever, and Damien was doing dabs per match, which I don't know how he was even talking by the end of that show, but he still sounded like a professional. But I like if you know who I am, I do Up Next and all that, but I definitely am very open and vocal about weed because I love it. And of course, a lot of people might just be like, you just like getting lit and getting stoned and watching wrestling. Yeah, it's amazing. Watching wrestling, as I heard someone earlier talking about the connection there, that's fantastic. It was definitely weed and New Japan Pro Wrestling that gets me just in this next, like, aura, like my comfort zone. Like, give me my bong and some New Japan. I'm in comfort zone. If I'm sick, I'll do that. That'll be my way to get better. But that's actually not the real reason I do like smoking weed, because it actually, just like a lot of you guys were talking about and some people calling in, it like helped me become just a way better version of myself. It somehow managed to like crack my shell. I know I host podcasts and I talk a whole lot of nonsense sometimes, but I'm like, I was an introvert. I was so like anxious all the time, but I had no idea. I was never like diagnosed or anything, but I couldn't figure out what that kind of was. I didn't smoke weed until I was probably, I tried it when I was like maybe like 17, 16, but I didn't start smoking until I was about like maybe 20. And after that, like I would dabble here and there, but now, yeah, I smoke every day. 420 was yesterday. It was great. But it helps me. It helps me do like so much more. No, I don't smoke when I go to my actual job. No, I gotta like kind of be on the ball. But when I have creative outlets, whether it's, you know, podcasting or I like making music and stuff like that, weed and that go hand in hand. When I like going out, I feel like I function better when I'm stoned. I know that sounds probably crazy to some people, but I find it for myself, it is true. And the whole thing about indica and sativa, I always find that is kind of not true as well. Like there's different things that might make me do different things or feel different ways, but everyone, it's like you have your comfort zone. I just talked to Davey on a show, I think last night or a few shows ago about, he got an allergy test and he loves eating cheese and this dude puts oregano on fucking everything. And this guy found out that he's not allergic to oregano, but it reacts, his body reacts in a different way. I feel like that's weed with some people, and it affects the way, you know, it affects the way my brain and everything. Like I always felt like I wasn't, I always felt like I was some sort of like nerd in high school in my early days. And then like later on in life, people who meet me are like, whoa, like you're a completely like different person. And it's like, yeah, you want to smoke up? Like I just like it's something, it opened this like new version of me that, yeah, I frankly, that I love. It makes me way more comfortable with myself. And I think a lot of people need to get that like stigma away from it. And I think slowly it's eventually, I think you guys said, like the next 50 years, it's going to be nuts, man. But smoking weed is great. Smoke them if you got them. I'm going to get my bong now. Wait, you already ripped that? It's
I already did it. Yeah, you talked right through 420 and you were on like a tear, so I didn't want to interrupt.
I'm sorry, I'm getting the bong, but I'm listening.
Okay, well, no, that's good. We're puff passing right now, as it were. Yeah, like I agree with you. For me, I think I function better with cannabis. But on the last fucked up tour in the UK, I was smoking weed in the van, in the back of the van. We were parked, and I wasn't driving. Don't worry, no one trusts me with the car. Before weed, no one would trust me with the car. And I was smoking weed in the van, and a cop started looking through the window. And so I was like, oh, shit, I'm not going out like that. And then all of a sudden, it was like Kobayashi. Like, I ate all of it, all the weed. Like, and then I had the apple that was like, when I smoke weed on the road, I take a water bottle, and then I put it through an apple. And I like kind of like use the apple as a bowl, and it's an amazing method to do it. I learned it from an emo band from Florida one time at a festival. Anyway, so I'm doing it like this. Yeah, look at this guy.
Braden is on camera right now.
Bucket hat Braden.
He's wearing a some sort of bucket hat. Yes,
he did a run-in
and his Calgary Hitmen jersey
with a Joker painting in the behind.
Yeah. There you go.
Happy 420.
There we go. Happy 420. Good to see you, my friend. Oh, that's awesome. Punch it in. But yeah, like it is certainly something that for me, I find I function better on. But on the last fucked up tour, anyway, the cops looking through the window, so I'm bringing myself back up to speed because I did just rip a massive dab. And the cops looked through the window. I ate the fucking weed apple that was like all smoked out that had been sitting in the van for like 2 days.
Oh my God.
And then I was like, shit, I don't have weed. But I was in such a good place mentally that I didn't really have anxiety, because the weird thing was in England, as soon as I played that first show, I'm like, I'm 1,000% going to get COVID. There's no way around it. And once I had surrendered myself to that, and it was just a matter of when I was able to kind of relax, and I found I didn't need the weed. You know, like it was one of the first fucked up tours where I was like, you know, I don't care if I get cannabis. And so after I Cookie Monstered all my weed and ate the weed apple on the third day of the tour, I went the rest of the tour without cannabis and was able to function just fine without it. And yeah, like, you know, and I want to go to Japan and fucked a place in Japan. I'm not risking prison for weed. I don't want to get, we all know what happened to certain wrestlers when they tried to bring some cannabis oil into that country. So I don't want to get caught for weed and have to go 3 months without weed. So I don't smoke when I go to Japan or when I go to Taiwan or when we went to Hong Kong. There's a lot of places that I just, the legality of it, it's just not worth it to smoke. And even places like, actually, I was just in Chicago and I could have walked to a store and bought overpriced shitty weed right there that was legal. And I opted to just have a good time and not do it. So yeah, I think it's like you're saying, Jordan, I don't need it, but when it's there, I do find it is almost like a performance enhancing drug for me. I can function better with it, but once again, it's not something that I need to function.
And I'm glad you noticed that because, when I was 21 or so, at that point, I was depressed. I had very, very little vision for what I was doing in life. And smoking weed became a crutch for me. It was a way to avoid not only those negative feelings, but avoid the responsibility of figuring out, what the fuck am I doing? And for a good while, I realized I became dependent on it in a very unhealthy way. That was my relationship to it. Not in totality, but it certainly became something where I didn't even think about it. I just did it because it became habitual. And my mom, a lovely woman, had a very direct, tough conversation with me, and kind of got me to open up emotionally and see what I was doing. And maybe after that, I didn't smoke for, a few weeks, a few months. But since then, it's one of those things where when I do consume it, it's much more intentional. And I've never once felt like it was something that I ever felt like I needed, or I felt like it was something that I was doing mindlessly. And for me, it was very helpful to become self-aware of that. And also just in general, maybe the potential of that happening again, either with cannabis or another substance. So it really just helped me develop a greater sense of, awareness and responsibility to self.
We got a bunch more calls to get to, but Braden, why don't you stick around here? Why don't you stick around, or do you have somewhere to be?
No, sure. Yeah.
You're stuck with us now.
I might have to jump off in about 10 minutes myself because I have to make a vegan Big Mac pizza for dinner.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
I know. I'm very excited about making this. I've been thinking about making this all day, and that is my next thing I have to do.
All right. Up next here in our calls, we got Kurt. Kurt, thank you for waiting very patiently. You are on the wellness policy.
Hi, Kurt.
What's up, everybody? Thank you for having me. Again, been a long-time listener of Wai and everything he's done. And Jordan, this show has been awesome. And Damien, too. Just a big fan of everyone. I hate that I have to follow Braden Harrington. He's the man. So I will just...
shout out Kurt. Shout out Kurt.
well, thank you. I am... been a long, I kind of experiences very close to Jordan's here, which just kind of made me kind of, raise my hand again. I've been listening for long periods of time, but I never unmute, never raise my hand, ask a question. But this one kind of spoke to me. Awesome. Very similar. Went through high school. I was a great student, straight A type student. Didn't really know what I wanted to do after, high school. Kind of traveled, worked on a fishing boat. But when I came back from, working on this fishing boat, I had a friend that was just like, hey, you want to try some of this marijuana? At the time, that's what they were calling it here. I'm in California, so marijuana is really big here. So I kind of, did my thing with that. And I agree, like Jordan, it opened up everything to me. I've used it through, I work for a very high-end educational school here on the West Coast here. So I can't mention any names, but it really led me to this path where, I've gotten 3 graduate degrees, all while smoking marijuana the whole time, just keeping me so focused and locked in. And then I felt too, I was creating this huge dependency, very similar to Jordan's last comment, where I felt I was just going through the motions every day to do it. So took a step back to kind of get it in prioritized. And just has really led to a very successful life. But I love that you guys are having this conversation on like a higher level, because I just don't think it happens. It's been such a thing that was put in the closet, of like, this is just how, avid marijuana users are, but it's just not. It's just not the case. So I do appreciate this conversation that you guys are having here. I did have one question though for Damien before he runs to make the Big Mac pizza. As someone with children too, and I do have one as well. Mine's are a lot older, I think, than yours. From listening,
I've got a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. So
I am 18, 9 and 11 here. So
okay.
The
yes.
18-year-old. Now, this is where, it's like...
It gets interesting, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I'm obviously a person that's a clear proponent of cannabis use. But, I don't know what kind of message I'm going to send to a son who has to come out here and get into a world that I know is a little more accepting of marijuana use. But if he starts lighting up, where does that conversation lead me of like, hey, I was a person who did not use until I got a lot older. But, just how do you manage the kid part of it if it comes up?
We got given a book right when the kids were born. Once again, by Josh from my band, who I mentioned earlier. And it's called It's Just a Plant. And it's like, just a very matter-of-fact book about cannabis. And I think he gave it to us almost like a gag gift, but I realized very early on that I'm just going to have a very open relationship with them and cannabis, especially at the time that they were being born, because I was making so much cannabis content and it was just so much a part of my life at that point that I was like, well, I just have to like raise them with it. So my hope, honestly, and this comes from someone who, will cheer for cannabis to the end of the days for myself personally, but my hope is that it's like my parents and smoking cigarettes, where I never thought smoking cigarettes were cool or interesting because my parents liked it. So I'm hoping that my kids are just like, I have no interest in weed because that's like my dad's shit. But but at the same time, like you said, like I'm also gonna have to be honest with them. Like if they come to me and they're like, I'm smoking cannabis, I'm gonna be like, okay, well, why, and I don't know, I guess that's definitely like, I'm interested, what your experiences are so far with it, Kurt, because I feel like that's a big question that I have coming up, especially with the 12-year-old entering a stage where he's like, yeah, kids in my school are talking about smoking pot, but he really does not seem to have any interest in it because like punk rock and wrestling and any number of things that I love, he thinks that shit is super boring and dad shit and wants nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I kind of think, I'm kind of having to have that conversation. I kind of spoke to him about it because, I saw like again, this is California. I saw like a Dutch master in the trash, when I took the trash out, and I'm like, I don't really go the Dutch master route, more natural leaf stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't really touch that. So I just kind of know. I was like, wait a minute, I know what these are for, so kind of had that conversation of like, hey, is there something going on? Just kind of wanted to start the conversation there. Is there something going on? Is this, something that, being influenced from your friends? It is something that's pretty apparent in this home. It's here again, sort of similar to Jordan's use. Don't need it every day, but I do have some again when I'd like to partake. So yeah, it's just trying to manage that conversation and just put them on the right path of like, are you doing this because you feel it's the cool thing now? Because again, with the legalization here, it has created a really crappy black market of marijuana that's still being sold here. And again, a lot of really expensive cannabis that's really trashy too in stores like MedMen and stuff like that. So
Yep. No, exactly. It's like, it's almost like encouraging me more to grow my own at this point, and having rosin around and having, just good cannabis around, that if it is a question, I'll be like, oh, well, here, like,
yeah,
much in the same way that parents, I think, would have been like, here, let's have wine together, which I think would definitely suck a lot of the fun out of it for them. You know, if they had to all of a sudden do like smoke weed with me, oh my God, would they hate that? Like, they would be like, "Oh, this so sucks, Dad." Like that's like, you know, and not even like that whole like, well, you're gonna have to smoke every one of these goddamn cigars then. But I mean, just even like having a joint, you know, and opening up and like, you know, let's just talk and be present. Like, oh, they would not be into that. But you know,
thank you for this, and thank you guys for this conversation again, and thank you for all of the content that all of you guys are creating here, Braden included. I love everything you guys produce, so thank you, and that's all I have.
Thank you for the call, Kurt.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I got to hear about that fishing boat, man. That sounds rad. Sounds pretty wild.
You're dressed for it, Braden.
I know. I'm ready for it. That's what I mean. Look at me. I'm ready.
There you go. Hey, we got a couple more calls left. We'll try to get them before these guys have to get out of here. Let's go up next to our man, Neil Flanagan. What's up, Neil?
Hey, guys. Damian, I love you too. I know other people have been saying it, so I'm getting in on that. And I'm sorry.
I love you too, Neil.
I'm sorry I missed you in Leeds. I was meant to be there, and I missed the opportunity. Unfortunately, I contracted COVID in the second half of that week. And
I heard you were missed. People were talking about you at the podcast. People were like, "Neil can't be here because he's got the vid."
Yeah. But however, I have a question, and it goes back to something that Jordan said earlier on about how poorly understood cannabis is. I find that amazing in this day and age, you know, that cannabis and all of its component parts, its active ingredients, aren't really well understood. And I think possibly, and this is my question, my theory is in industrialized Western culture, you don't get big pharmaceutical trials with proper control groups and all the data that you need to get published in journals unless you've got funding mostly from large pharmaceutical groups. And it's not in their interest, seems to me, because they can't patent cannabis. For that to happen, they would rather someone with chronic pain take one of their painkillers that they produce. They would rather someone with anxiety takes one of their anti-anxiety medications. Do you think that's a big influence on governments and lack of proper investigation into exactly what it is about cannabis that brings these benefits? Because we all know anecdotally, even if there aren't surveys and published data, we all know that there are people who benefit hugely, whether it's anxiety, chronic pain, just benefits to their social lives and all the rest of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Neil.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of the holdup. If you look at like who has benefited from years of prohibition, it's been pharmaceutical companies, alcohol companies, tobacco companies. Like there is a lot of people that have wanted to keep cannabis illegal because like you're saying, the reality is you can grow it, you know, like you can grow your own medicine. You take some skill, obviously, to grow it well, but at the end of the day, you can grow your own. But I think the same with magic mushrooms. I think, you know, like if you look at what's happening in Oregon, again, like there's legalization efforts that are on the horizon, but they're not legalizing it for recreational at all. They're going to legalize it for medicinal use, and you have to get someone to guide you through the trip and all this sort of stuff. Like I think there is a general kind of coming around to the realization that a lot of the stuff that's been made illegal, there is benefits for, you know, like even replacing opioids with some form of, you know, opium extraction. You know, I think that is also something that, you know, could be done. And probably there's a lot of benefit that could be had for a lot of people out there, especially people that are abusing or using these things recreationally when it comes to opioids.
We got one more call to get to. This person has been waiting the longest out of everybody, and we always save him for last. We got a New Jersey.
I was wondering why, but now I see why.
We got a New Jersey with Brandon. Are you there, sir?
I'm here. What's going on, man?
Just waiting for you.
Brandon, you sound kind of clear.
Yeah. What should I have bad Wi-Fi or something?
Did you get a microphone?
I mean, yeah, I mean, of course, but I'm on my phone, so why? What's up?
No,
Brandon,
continue.
phone-
I'm excited.
Mike.
Brandon, have you
All
been
right, well,
watching Baywatch lately, or?
Yeah, that was fun, man. Yeah, we did a Baywatch Vader show together. It was great. Damien, big fan, man. Love
I
you.
know. I've talked to you. I'm a big fan of your calls, so I feel like the feeling's mutual. My kids are arriving home just as you're doing this too, so I might have to pull a gimmick and run off.
All right, I'll be real quick. I remember you and John were talking about. I want to rewind a show about wet, and I think you asked him if you ever smoked it before or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember, but I was at a Halloween party, and I was dressed as Ryu from Street Fighter, and my brother Simon was dressed up as Arnold, and I, unbeknownst to me, I got a joint, and I took a toke of it, and unbeknownst to me, I didn't know it was laced with wet, so. It was a horrible experience, man. I went through 3 different stages of mania, and it wasn't WrestleMania either. It was I was at one moment I was laughing like the Joker. I couldn't stop laughing. It was frightening.
I'm so sorry. I gotta run because I'm hearing the kid cry in the background, but I will listen to the podcast version of you rapping.
I'll keep talking.
Okay, absolutely.
Thank you so much,
Sorry,
Damien, for joining
everyone.
us.
There's been a lot of fun.
No. Enjoy your
Bye,
pizza.
Damien.
Bye.
Thank you, Damien.
See you later.
So yeah, I'll keep talking. So I couldn't stop laughing, and the other stage was I was in complete panic, and I was scared out of my mind. I thought I was gonna die. I couldn't breathe. It was ridiculous. And then I got really hot. So I just started. This party was at a really bad part of town. It was in Kensington, in outside of North Philly. If you know, it's a pretty hardcore bad town. So I started stripping my clothes off because I was getting really hot, my costume. And I started walking outside the apartment into the streets, completely in my underwear. And my brother had to pull me back and rescue me. It was a really bad trip.
Oh my, sounds very dangerous.
So I advise you if you smoke wet, don't do it. It's bad.
I mean, I don't even know how I would look out for that.
Well, one of the good reasons that it's much more regulated now. So there's a system in place with checks and balances and audits and all that, and we now can know and be informed by professionals of what we are purchasing and what we're consuming, and that in large part is a wonderful thing for public health.
Mm-hmm.
But now you got cocaine with fentanyl now, so that's the other shit. That's crazy.
Yeah, but there's a lot of, I'm speaking from Toronto here, but there's a lot of people who assume there's going to be fentanyl laced in your weed, and it's that just doesn't make sense. Are you going to somewhere you don't know these places that you go to and people putting things in their joints and stuff like that? That's a totally kind of different thing. Trust me, it does happen, just like people, spiking drinks and stuff like that as well. But I myself, that has never happened to me. Although someone once gave me a joint when it had hash in it, which I've not ever smoked before, which then sent me on a whole other thing. But I was at a Sublime concert, so I was all right. It was okay. But it sent me off. But I couldn't imagine getting something else like you saying, Brandon. That sounds terrifying. If you've had bad trips on other things like mushrooms or something, you could probably attest to a situation where you're oh my God, Wai mentioned earlier, you're not a fan of not being able to control it, or okay, I'm done with this. You can't turn it off. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely what you were going through. That sounds scary, but does that mean, Brandon, that you'll never smoke again?
Yeah, I got my job where I was where I'm at right now. So I mean, you can't smoke, you can't do drugs and shit like that because they randomly drug test you. But yeah, I told myself, the biggest bummer is I wanted to eat a burger at Checkers. Everyone went to Checkers that night, and I couldn't eat it. It was a tragedy because I was in a K-hole. I was in a state of panic. But yeah, I mean, it kind of scared me away from. It kind of scared me straight. Actually, I mean, weed is. I got no beef with people doing weed and whatnot. Whatever, it's legal in New Jersey today. and whatnot. So, I mean, I got no beef with the drug, but I mean, it's just not, it wasn't for me, I guess. But yeah, I mean, you want to know what you're in control of and whatnot. And, I mean, in that case, I was not. I was out of my mind. Like,
that's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the key in all of this is just education and free discussion so that people are even aware that something like this might possibly happen, you know, and to be aware of what you're consuming in your system, to just have a better understanding. And so much of that, you know, comes down to just being able to freely discuss it. And
also know the people who you're around with either, because the people that gave me the joint, I had no idea who they were. So that was a bad idea on my end, but I mean, whatever. When in Rome, right?
Yeah, you got a Jeffrey. No one's scared of a Jeffrey because it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But once you smoke it, damn. But I one day want to smoke with Brandon. That's my goal. Definitely add that to the list with Wai.
I think what I did wrong too that night too was like you take a minor toke, but I decided to completely bogart it and like take a massive hit.
Well,
this is why I want to smoke with you.
Yeah, you are filled with interesting stories, and this is only one among them. But we always thank you for your contributions.
Oh
to,
man,
our
Wai,
shows,
thank
Brandon.
you, man. You're a god among men.
Thank you.
I love you.
Thank
brother.
you. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Brandon.
I noticed something that wasn't talked about is on a show about weed is like rolling a joint. I guess I should have asked Damien this, but I mean, Wai, you're not like a true
not at all.
smoker. But Jordan, do you know how to roll a joint?
My girlfriend does it for me.
That's how I used to do it until finally.
No, dude, I've always had much more experienced friends around me, and kind of followed their lead. And I guess I've made attempts, but like many things that I don't follow through with, I guess I just haven't cared enough.
Like I used to never do it. I always used to have like ex-girlfriends or my friends in the circles would always just roll for me. And then I started using like a rolling little dock thing. And then just one day I'm at a party, and kind of like how Brandon was saying, there was actually a lot of like a biker gang showed up at this party, and these guys walked in, they dropped a huge nug on the like counter and said, you know, whoever can roll me a joint, like smoke with me. So I was kind of drunk, and then I just decided to roll a joint, which I could never do, but I proceeded to roll like the best joint I've ever rolled in my life. And then like since that day, like I've been pretty like good at it, and it's almost like a skill. I know Damien was mentioning a lot of people in different parts of the world roll their own cigarettes, and some people obviously put the weed and stuff like that in it, but like it's like almost become like quite a skill. And then like call me crazy, but somehow I'm also now really good at rolling sushi. And I thought it was like, oh, that's just a funny coincidence. Snoop Dogg has now since said that he is really good at also rolling his own sushi, because I think it's a similar technique. So therefore, quite a shame you can't really smoke weed in Japan. But yeah, it's like the same like kind of formation there.
Listen,
the way to do it.
If the Japanese like ever legalize marijuana, I think it'd be a revolution in technology. You know, the amount of like
yeah, they'd figure everything out for sure.
Holy
100%.
shit, dude!
I would move there, no problem. I would love to be really high at Wrestle Kingdom. It'd just be great. Yeah.
You might have to wait a while for any of those things to come true. But hey, such a joy to have you on the show, Braden. Anytime.
Hey, thank you guys. You guys are amazing. This show is amazing. You guys do. This is the best show. Like this is the show. Like don't sleep on the wellness policy.
Well, it came about because I heard Jordan on your show. So you really like you and Davey are the ones who started it. So thank you.
And speaking of, Braden and I we're recording something next week.
Yeah, we're doing a show. So Davey's actually coming back next week, and I still wanted to like record something for. We have a Patreon over at Up Next, and we do all sorts of stuff. But I wanted to get like a different kind of show in or something, and I haven't even figured out what we're calling it, what it is. But Jordan's going to join me. We're going to chat. Maybe we'll talk about some weed. We'll talk about some wrestling, some music, and all sorts of fun stuff. But that'll be out next week. So yeah, I'm super pumped. But yeah, you guys they're killing it with this show. So shout out Post Wrestling. Over everything, as I like to say. But thank you guys. Thank
you, Braden.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Cheers.
Shout out the BDE Patreon, and of course, shout out our guest for this episode, Damian Abraham. You can find him at Left for Damien, somebody who's always incredibly busy yet incredibly generous with his time. I want to give a quick plug for Turn Out a Punk this week, where he is talking to none other than MVP. I believe they even get into a bit of 420 talk on top of, MVP's very deep history with the punk rock music scene. So that is a very interesting conversation. Go and find Turn Out a Punk anywhere you download your podcast. Jordan Goodman, what else you got going on?
I don't know. I'm about to go to work in 5 minutes. That's what I'm doing. At Jordan Beatwell, if you want to connect with me. We had a lot of callers today, Wai. What a treat. It's really nice to know that what we're doing with this show is resonating in meaningful ways. So yeah, I just really want to take this time to offer my appreciation and gratitude for everyone who interacts with this show, whether with us live or more passively listening wherever you may be. It doesn't go unnoticed, and we're very grateful for that. So thank you.
Completely agreed. I share those comments, and thank you everybody for being active in the chat room, or if you're simply listening to this after the fact, thank you for checking us out. We try to be live every single month on a Thursday at 3:00 Eastern, so stay tuned to our social media for the next one. So thank you everybody. Till next time. See you later.